Thank you all again for joining the Blythe Create Beauty campaign. I am just going to be rinsing out the items that we dyed last night together. I'm going to start out with the muck dye, and I wanted to show you what it looks like after it is set for 24 hours. It looks like a black mess, but I promise it'll turn out really pretty. So I usually do this outside, but I live in Colorado and it is frigid here. So I'm going to be doing this in the kitchen sink. And just rinsing until I get the majority of the dye out. And then I'm going to do a quick little hand wash with some Textile Detergent. You can also use a couple drops of Dawn dish soap. That works as well. It kind of helps release some of that extra dye that's going to be in your project. And then I will take it to the washing machine where I'll do a rinse cycle and then a couple of wash cycles and another extra rinse cycle just to get as much of that excess dye out as possible. So I'm just going to put on some gloves real quick so I don't turn purple. And get these rinsed out. Alright, so I'm just going to pour off the excess dye, making sure not to splatter. This stuff is a mess. I'm just gonna squeeze out all this excess dye as I go. And that's probably hard to see, but it is just pouring out. Lots of purple right now. I really like doing this outside because with the garden hose it just makes the whole process quite a bit faster. And then I usually keep several tubs out there that I consistently fill with water and with soap while I'm working on other projects. This helps release more of that dye over time. It'll be fun to see how this turned out. So this one was the reverse dye, flat blank. I have those still on the website. Those are Fright Night. Fun Halloween colorway. Just remove some dye from some black fabric. Makes a really cool look. But when you do that, you can over dye. And where it removes in that cream and orange area, you can easily over dye. And then it turns out really neat looking with that black background. It'd be hard to tell exactly what it looks like wet, but once we're able to put it through a couple of wash cycles in the washing machine and get it dried, I'll post and link some pictures of the results. I'm getting less and less dye out of it, which is great. So I'm going to add a little bit of my Textile Detergent. And I will link this because I've lost the label on it. I believe this is the off-brand that Dharma carries of their Textile Detergent. I'm just going to use a little dash. A little goes a long way on this Textile Detergent. I'm going to plug my sink and let this soak for a little bit. Just do a good hand wash on it. See some really cool colors popping out on it now. I'm gonna let that soak for a little bit while we move on to the next one. So this one that I'm gonna have over here, let me move my camera. My ring light broke. I blame my 2-year-old, so I'm not really able to get the greatest angle on this, but I hope you can still tell what I'm doing. So this was what was on the rack. So you will have kind of a muddled effect, which is going to be really neat once we rinse it out. So I just took it off the rack to bring it inside. All of the ice was melted. So in the wintertime, you might need to batch longer because it really needs warm temperatures to set that color really well. So usually in the winter time, I will put mine, because I dye in the garage during the winter because it's way too cold to do it outside. But one great thing is I use snow instead of ice in the winter time because we usually have an abundance of snow out here. But I do all of my dyeing in bins out in the garage, and I usually put them, my bins, on top of really cheap heating blankets, and that helps get up to temperature so that the dye will set really well. So that's something you can do if it's cold where you are. I was hoping to get this out this summer. There's always something that comes up. This will still be fun. Continue to rinse and squeeze out all that excess glue. This one was teal and bluebird. This is what we used on this one. And again, this was the one that we just scrunched on a rack with dye over ice. And this will have less in it just simply because it was on a rack and it wasn't sitting in the dye overnight. So I'm going to go ahead, do a couple more rinses and squeezes, and then put some of that Textile Detergent on it real quick. In a little bit of detergent. Blues and purples, they release excess dye for quite a while. So even after you do this a few times and put it through the washer a couple of times and then rinse in the washing machine, I would still suggest washing it separately a couple more times, and then use a color catcher when you wash it. Just make sure you don't get any bleeding of dye onto any of your other items. I know a lot of people use old towels that they don't necessarily care about to wash it with the first couple of times. But I mean, with all the washing, it's prepping your diapers. So a step you would have to do anyways to make sure that your fabric is good and absorbent. Okay, so I'm going to let this soak, and I'm going to move back over to my original one. I'm going to take off my gloves now. Move back over here. Let's see what we can come out with here. The stopper's a little sticky. You can still see quite a bit of purple coming out, and I've got this on pretty hot water too. I like to rinse it on cold first, and then I work it up towards hot. Opens up those fibers and releases more of the dye. So whenever I get a new dyed item, before I put it on my little, I always soak it in hot water several times to get as much dye to release as possible and then throw it in the washing machine a couple times separately to make sure and get all the excess out. And then I use a color catcher the first couple of times whenever I have it in a combined load. All right, getting less and less out. For the sake of not having a super long video, I'm going to squeeze out all the excess and see if we can tell a little bit of what it came out to look like. Alright, so I don't think we're going to be able to tell really until we get this washed out really good, but you can really see here the black background and how that really picked up on the dye. It's going to look really awesome once it's washed and dried. So I'm excited to get this one posted. I'll do a couple more rinses, maybe another soak in some of this detergent water, and I'm going to throw it in the washing machine, and hopefully tomorrow morning I'll have some pictures of results for you. Let's see if we can get a peek of any results over here. It's releasing a lot more blue. And I'll probably wash these two together because I mean the color schemes are pretty close, blue and purple. They're not going to hurt each other. You definitely wouldn't want to do light and dark together if you're doing several different blanks. You want to wash them separately so you don't want any bleed over. But in these dark colors, dark and dark, shouldn't be an issue. So when I have huge yardage of fabric that I've dyed, I have my washing machine do this work for me. So I'll just put it on, I'll rinse it out with the garden hose, soak it a couple times in my huge bins outside, and then I will bring it into the garage. I've got a special setup in the garage just for my dyeing. And I will put the links, usually 10 yards at a time, and do a couple of rinse cycles, and then a couple of wash cycles and another rinse before I dry it and make the products whenever I do bulk yardage. I try to get out as much as possible, but I would definitely be a never-ending washing of fabric process. I am blessed to live on a farm and have well water, so I don't have to worry about my water bill. So that helps tremendously as well. Alright, I'm just going to squeeze out, get some of this soap out so we can see if we can see any results here. It's harder with these dark ones to see right away what it's going to look like until it's dry. Alright, let's open this up. It's going to be really pretty. Lots of breaks with some purple and the teal. The blue broke really pretty. So I'll get these washed up, get them dry, and I will post some result pictures. So y'all have a great night.